The Stone and the River. Tales from the Banks of the Spey. Prologue. The Bridge at Whistle-stop Woods. The day was one of those soft, forgiving ones, where summer still lingers in the air, even as autumn begins to clear its throat. A thin haze hung over the car park at Whistle-stop Woods, and the birch trees shimmered in the half-light, their leaves already flecked with gold. "Dad?" "Mm-hmm." Shona stood beside him at the path's edge, small hand swallowed in his. She was ready for adventure, coat zipped, pockets full, and a tangerine bulging against the seam. "I'm going to find a squirrel today." He smiled. "Then listen for falling acorns. That's usually how they give themselves away." She gave a determined look and focused on the path ahead. The path ahead wound gently forward, an old railway line now softened by moss and age. Fallen leaves scattered across it in a mottled carpet of gold and rust. The two set off hand in hand, boots crunching softly. To their left, the land dropped away towards the golf course and then the river. To their right, a wall of hazel and birch whispered in the wind. A faint murmur of water followed them, steady and secret. "Look!" Shona gasped. A pale butterfly, almost translucent, coasted lazily across the path, drifting on a stray gust. "Do you think that's a fairy?" she asked. He pretended to think. "Could be. But I reckon fairies only borrow the wings, just for travelling." Shona nodded, solemnly satisfied. The viaduct bridge rose ahead, a graceful sweep of stone and iron, arched over the wide, patient river. It was a relic of another age, a skeleton of purpose and pride. Built in the late 19th century, the viaduct once carried iron and steam along the Murray Coast Railway. Goods, people, and the steady confidence of an age of industry. It served its purpose well, until quieter times came, and the line was abandoned, as so many grand things are. Since then, the bridge had known another life, no longer a machine of progress, but a place of crossing and pause. Walkers, children, cyclists, all drawn to the same high span above the river, where stone and iron endured, patient, proud, long after their makers were gone. As they stepped onto the wooden sleepers, Shona held tighter to his hand. Each plank clung softly underfoot, hollow with memory. Below, the River Spey flowed dark and strong, curling around willows and reeds that bent in greeting. Between the iron and rivets, they peered upstream. There was a gentle pool, undisturbed by the current. Light shimmered across the water, where two swans glided, their reflections unbroken, their grace unhurried. For a moment, time stood still, as they breathed in the cool autumn air and drank in the precious calm. Shona tugged on his sleeve. He felt his focus shift from the dreamlike scene back to the here and now. "Dad?" "Uh-huh." "Can I have my orange now?" He looked down and smiled. "Let's get to the seats." He glanced back once more at the water, then took her hand, and together they continued their adventure. Continuing on, they crossed to the far side and scrambled down beneath the bridge. There, in the filtered light, the world grew smaller, stiller. A shallow pool mirrored the underbelly of the bridge, its surface broken only by drifting leaves. The air smelled of damp stone and iron. "Here," said Father, sitting on a low wall. He peeled the tangerine slowly, its scent sweet and golden in the cool air. Shona sat beside him, swinging her legs. "Do you think," she began, "if we shouted here, someone would shout back?" He grinned. "Only if they're listening." She cupped her hands around her mouth and called, "Hello!" The echo came, long, drawn, soft. Shona giggled, wondering who answered. "That's not someone," he said, lowering his voice. "That's the Gnome King answering." "The Gnome King?" she repeated, wide-eyed. He looked around, as if checking no one else was near. "Well, they say he lives deep beneath all this, under the river, under the hills, in a great hall made of crystals and silver. The water runs above his roof, and he listens to everything that touches the earth." Shona frowned thoughtfully. "Even us?" "Oh, aye," he said, deepening his tone. "Especially us. He likes the sound of laughter best. It helps him know the world's still alive." She gazed out towards the slow-moving water, thinking hard. "Was that 10,000 years ago?" Her father chuckled. "Could be longer. Maybe he was here before there was even a river." Shona's eyes widened, and for a moment both of them were quiet, listening. They played and laughed with echoes for a while, her bright voice against the stone, his deeper one answering in silly tones, until the light began to turn honey gold. When they finally rose to go, Shona hesitated, looking once more at the shadowed archway beneath the bridge. "Do you think he's really there?" she asked. He smiled, and the question hung between them. "Maybe," he said softly, "or maybe he's just waiting for someone to believe in him again." And as they walked away, the river shimmered differently, as though something deep below had indeed stirred at the sound of their joy. And far beneath the bridge, past the roots and stone, something did stir, old and patient, and listening still. The Hall Beneath the World. Beneath the roots of the world, so deep that even sound forgets the way, there is said to be a place where the stone hums to itself. Some call it the Hall Beneath the World, though none can say who first gave it that name. It is whispered that the walls there breathe, that they pulse faintly with the rhythm of the living earth. The light within them comes not from flame, nor moon, nor sun, but the slow resonance of stone itself, like the song of an ancient crystal still remembering the moment it was born. They say the walls are lined with pillars of quartz, cathedrals of amethyst, and veins of jade that gleam with a soft inner pulse. Through the cavern runs a river of silver, smooth as glass, flowing without sound, but carrying the faint tremor of every heartbeat above. And at the far end of the great hall sits a throne, carved from the hearts of mountains, or so the stories claim. Upon it rests the Gnome King, first of the stone folk, and keeper of all that endures. None can agree on what he looks like. Some say he is carved from granite and gold, broad as a boulder, and heavy as the world itself. Others swear that he is a shimmer in the quartz, a ripple that stirs when the earth groans in its sleep. A few believe he is the mountain itself, that every rock, every pebble is a single thought in his ancient mind. Whatever the truth, the stories agree on this. He is patient, older than time, slower than sleep, and steady as the soil that receives both root and seed. It is said that his kin, the gnomes of the deep, live all around him, half born from the rock. They do not speak, but they feel the language of pressure and turning and weight. They are the quiet ones who hold the world in place, When mountains strain, they brace them. When tides press too far upon the land, they shoulder the swell. When the skin of the world cracks, they push back, smoothing the tremor so rivers and valleys may keep their shape. They are never seen, yet always working. And when the world shivers beneath our feet, some say it is only the gnomes adjusting the balance. When at last the deep places grew still, their labour fell to silence, and the earth began to listen. When the tremor stilled, and the silence returned, a lighter rhythm answered from above, the first footsteps of humankind. A few old tales claim that long ago, humankind and gnomes were not strangers. When man first shaped flint, the ground hummed with curiosity, and the gnome king stirred. He sent his smallest kin, the crags and groundlings, to guide them. They taught that every stone carried its own gift. Flint held the spark of fire. Granite bore the weight of walls. Sandstone shaped the hearth. Soft enough for carving, strong enough for time. Even the river stones, smooth and patient, learned to guide the flow of water home. From these lessons rose the first circles and cairns, memory set in rock, a song the earth could keep. They showed the early builders how to lift stone, to align to the stars, to raise circles that marked the sun's long journey. Yet time, as always, watched humankind follow the sun to their slow undoing. Empires rose, empires fell. The gnomes watched as humankind turned from stone to bronze, from bronze to marble, from marble to crowns and columns that reached for the sun. Cities climbed where circles once stood. Kings raised towers to outlast the sky, their names carved deep in lintels of pride and prayer. But even marble crumbles. Even bronze grows green with age, and when the dust of their empire settled, only hard stone remained, silent, remembering. They forgot the old songs of the earth, forgot the slow rhythm that once tied them to the soil. In stillness they listened, but the earth's answer had changed, the teachers forgotten, their song unremembered. So the gnomes withdrew again into their dreaming earth. It is said that, over time, they forgot the feeling of warmth, of the seasons turning, of the world's soft heartbeat. The pulse that once sang through the stone's deep veins now reaches them only faintly, a resonance travelling through old veins of iron. Still, some linger near the surface, half asleep in riverbeds, meadows, and mossy hills. They wait for something they no longer remember, for the earth moves slowly, and so do they. And deep beneath the riverbed, where the roots of hills and trees entwine, the old king keeps his halls. There, the echoes of his people drift like slow currents of light, waiting for the warmth of a voice to wake them once more. The Bridge. They sat together on a low wall beside the bridge. A cool breeze lifted their hair and set the river dancing with light. Shona swung her legs, heels tapping softly against the stone. One of the last autumn leaves caught in the current below, spinning lazily before drifting away downstream. "Dad," she said suddenly, peeling another tangerine, "how long do gnomes live for?" He smiled and passed her a segment. "Well," he said, They live for a long, long time, as long as the hills and rivers and everything that remembers. She chewed thoughtfully. But people only live to 100. Sure, he said, nodding. But the gnome would live much longer, she said to herself, frowning. What if a gnome made friends? Her face softening as she looked at Dad. He glanced at her, and then back to the water where the sunlight shimmered and broke. I think some gnomes have been woken by animals, he said quietly. And sometimes, he added, they even made friends. Shona smiled at that. Like me? She said, her tone getting higher. He shrugged lightly. Maybe. Or maybe a vole. She turned the tangerine peel over in her hand, thoughtful. For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind caught another leaf and carried it high above the water, spinning, glinting gold in the light, until it fell and was gone. The Vole. In the early light of late summer, the vole splashed in the shallows, playful, alive, her dark eyes bright with the day's first gleam. She nibbled on a root that coiled at the base of a reed, looking up nervously before returning to her task. Her paws and whiskers brushed against a stone in the river. The last warmth of the season spread across the water. The air was thick with slow wings and drifting seeds. As she moved, she disturbed the ground, and her warmth touched something that could not be touched, a thought still buried in stone, and slowly he awoke. No eyes to open, no breath to take, only the faint tremor of life moving above him. He felt the vole's light tread through the soil, her quick heart pulsing against the long hush of his own. Through her warmth he sensed the river's voice, the reeds bending, the world alive. He did not know her shape, but he knew her presence, small, bright, certain. And in that knowing, something impossible stirred. He felt what was never meant to be, affection. Patient of heart, deep of thought, he felt her play, forage and vanish, only to return again. Not out of curiosity, but in the quiet wonder that there was such movement in the world he was rooted to. He would drift into stillness and feel her near again, gathering leaves, shaping tunnels, building a home. The stone lay deep in his covenant, to hold the river steady, to bear its weight and guide its song. For ages he had stood firm and still, while water shaped him smooth, and time wore its patient circles around him. He remained steadfast. Then one morning he felt her, the vole's small claw, the touch of her snout, the quick rustle at his side. Each time her warmth called to the oldest part of him, the part that remembered what it was to offer shelter to another. Then the flood came, deluge and earth shifting. The river rose and roared around him, churning silt, tearing roots. He braced to hold the line, as he always had. But through the torrent he felt her fragile heartbeat race, the fear, the panic, as the earth subsided around them, her pulse of life defiant against the might of the river, a plea that pulled to the oldest vow within him. And so, for the first time in a millennia, the stone moved. He broke from the earth, shaping a path through the waters until he reached her. The gods above and below watched on. The stone had abandoned his sworn duty for something higher. They smiled, gladdened that even the earth remembers what the heavens had long forgotten. He lifted the vole gently from the flood and held her there until the river calmed. and her small heartbeat slowed against the warmth of his shoulder. As the river's flow eased and the air grew cold, the vole built her home beneath the warm lintel that was the stone. She was aware of his slow pulse, a faint, patient warmth rising from his centre. He felt her small heart beating close, and a tenderness stirred he had never known. The stone shifted ever so slightly, offering her shelter from the sky. Together they made the refuge, the creature and the keeper, each guarding the other. As the ice sheets formed and the wild land froze, they held one another, the stone feeling her breath, her life, her fragile warmth, the vole feeling his stillness, his strength, his endless watching. For a while, time itself stood still, as though the world were holding its breath. Between them, a warmth beyond touch, like the slow breath of spring that thaws more than ice. Something ancient stirred within the stone, a memory of the sun, and the frost upon the reeds loosened its grip, though all around them the heart of winter lay still, silent, unbroken. As the earth stirred and the air softened, the first light returned over the water. Pockets of meltwater trickled beneath the ice, and the frost withdrew from the river's edge. The thaw came, and the river ran bright and full again. For a moment he felt her warmth pass through the reeds, quick and light as spring rain, and then her silence followed. Around him the world rushed on, the river loud with its new life, reeds whispering, wings breaking the surface. He watched, quiet with hope, his heart slow and steady as the earth beneath him. Days lengthened, and the sun climbed higher, and the soft gleam of moss returned across his shoulders. He listened to the water's murmur, to the wings of birds crossing the sky, and to the faint pulse of warmth still resting in his core. Time moved gently around him. He no longer counted mornings or the drift of clouds. He only counted the rhythm of the river, the hush between breaths. In those silences he began to understand. The little one would not return, and the warmth he kept was never meant to be his to hold. Yet the warmth remained, gentle and untroubled, like sunlight held in stone long after dusk. The river would remember. The moss would keep her scent, and he, the stone, would endure, blessed by the memory of her warmth. Slowly he sank back into the hush of the bank, where root and water met, and the earth closed around him. Her lingering warmth, the seasons, the silence, eternal. The Girl and the Gnome. The bridge bounced softly under Shona's feet as she ran, singing a song made up about rabbits and ducks and brave explorers. The air smelt of leaves and river water and something new beginning. "Come on, Dad," she called. He was far behind, pretending to study the sky, or maybe the map, or maybe just being slow on purpose. She liked the way her footsteps made the bridge hum. It felt as if the bridge was singing with her. Below, the River Spey caught the morning light, and it broke into ripples of gold and blue, twisting like a sleeping dragon. "What's under the bridge, Dad?" she asked, turning mid-skip so her hair flew in the wind. "Let's go see," he said, and together they followed the little path that curled down towards the water. Under the bridge it was quiet, and the breeze swirled like a whisper. The air smelt of wet leaves and rusty nails. "Hey, look," said Shona, pointing to a narrow path below. It followed the water where a small stream ran across the stones. In the brook were 5 big rocks, sitting in a row like stepping stones, or maybe like giants having a meeting. "Perfect for crossing," she said, and before Dad could answer, she hopped onto the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Shona started to fall. As her foot landed on the 5th stone, it seemed to grumble. It wasn't a splashy sort of noise, more like a deep, sleepy grant that came from under her boots. The stone gave a tiny shiver, then settled again, just enough to keep her from falling in. Dad, of course, didn't notice. He was staring at the water. Shona blinked. "Weird," she whispered, and stepped back carefully, eyes fixed on the stone that had saved her from a soaking. On the way home, Shona said, "I like that funny stone. I wish I could see it again." That evening, the river grew quiet. Then, something moved. It was the strange stone. He was a gnome, though not like the garden kind with a red hat and beard. He was a river gnome, round and mossy, shaped by years of water and light. To most people, he looked like a stone, but he wasn't. Not really. When the little girl had stepped on his head, she'd woken something deep inside him, a tickle of laughter he hadn't felt in a very long time. He stood up slowly, roots creaking into legs, arms stretching out like branches after a storm. The sound was all groans and crackles, and a very big yawn. "Oh," said the gnome, rolling his shoulders, "that feels better." He hadn't had a visitor in 100 years. Now he was going to seek out the little girl who had woken him with her laughter, the one who had stood on his head and made him remember what it felt like to smile. The gnome took his first step, and almost fell flat on his face. He'd forgotten how to walk. He wobbled and creaked and finally found his balance, then started off in the direction where he'd heard the girl laugh. Leaves rustled around his feet as he plodded along the old path towards the village, heading for the set of steps that climbed the hill. Halfway there, he heard footsteps. Something big was coming. 8 legs, at least. He froze. No, wait, not a monster. 2 people and a dog. Phew. Quick as a blink, the gnome hunched down and turned himself back into a boulder. Well, boulder-ish. The dog barked and sniffed him all over. "Come on," said the owner, tugging at the lead. "It's just a rock." They passed, and the gnome let out a slow, stony sigh. He straightened up again, peering around, then slowly but surely he started up the steps, arms swinging, legs creaking, looking rather like a boulder learning to dance. The gnome climbed to the top of the hill and looked around. Before him stretched a strange, flat path, wide as a river, smooth as stone. He was just about to cross when the ground began to shake. A terrible rumble roared through the air. Then whoosh! A giant metal beast came thundering past, 2 bright eyes blazing as it sped along on circles instead of feet. The gnome squeaked, "Monsters!" and threw himself behind a clump of grass. He peeked out once the noise faded. The beast was gone. He brushed himself off, muttering, "Well, that was rude," and he decided perhaps he'd cross later. He stopped for a while, looked around, both ways, listened, and when all was quiet, he crossed the road to the field opposite. The gnome trudged on until the path turned soft beneath his feet. He'd reached a wide sunny field, dotted with bales of hay and woolly white creatures that blinked at him from afar. He could hear laughter somewhere beyond, the girls' laughter, carried on the wind. He smiled. He was getting close. A sleepy sheep wandered over, chewing as it walked. The gnome stopped, stood tall, and gave a friendly wave with his stick-like hands. "Good day to you, little cloud creature," he said brightly. The sheep blinked once, twice, then bolted, bleating as it ran. The gnome sighed. "Honestly," he muttered, "no manners at all." Still, he kept marching, sploshing through the muddy furrows until he reached the far hedge. And there, just beyond it, he could see the orange slate roof of a wee house on a quiet street. Somewhere deep inside the gnome, his core gave a tremor and his moss tingled. He was nearly there. At last, the gnome found the house he'd been looking for. To him, the journey had taken only a short walk. But in the world of people, a whole week had passed. The evening was turning blue, streetlights flickered on, and his long shadow followed him up the road. Inside the house came the sound of laughter, plates clinking, and voices bright and warm. It made something in his chest feel warmer. He decided to wait in the garden until the morning. Crunch, crunch. He tiptoed across the gravel, apologising to every stone. "Sorry, buddy. Oh, sorry again." At the far corner of the garden, he saw the perfect spot, beside a big summer house and a line of flower pots. He gave a great yawn, curled himself into shape, and by the time the stars appeared, he looked just like a boulder once more. Shona woke the next morning and had snuggles with Mum, kind, warm and happy. After Sunday breakfast, she got ready for the day. Outside, the garden smelled of dew from the grass and toast from the kitchen. While Mum got ready, Shona went out to play. That's when she saw it, a big stone in the garden. Not just any stone, the funny stone. She ran across the grass. "Grant!" she called, copying the sound she remembered from the bridge. The gnome opened one eye, puzzled. He'd never had a name before. The name echoed within him, gentle as rain on old earth. Before he could say a word, Shona hugged him tight. He was warm, and for the first time in 100 years, he was truly happy to his core. In the weeks that followed, Shona and Grant got up to all sorts of capers together. Mum asked Dad to fetch some noodles from the pantry, but Shona ran outside first. Grant bent down low, and Shona climbed right up on his head. Together they reached the very top shelf. Shona came back inside, holding noodles high like treasure. Dad looked out the window. "Oh, look at that mess! Leaves all over the grass," he said with a sigh. When he went back inside, Grant quietly helped. He swept the garden clean with his long, gentle arms. Later, Grant spotted one of his favourite creatures, a tiny brown mouse. He helped it scurry past the big tortoise-shell cat, back to the safety of the tall grass. The cat blinked and wondered where her game had gone. That afternoon, Shona wanted to draw with chalk on the patio. Mum and Dad were too busy, so Grant knelt beside her, and together they filled the stones with colour, a sun, a flower, and a funny green shape that looked a lot like him. After all the leaves had fallen, and the frost began to creep along the path, ice started to form around Grant's legs when he sat still overnight. But this time he didn't mind. He felt something special. He felt like he was home. One night, he felt a tiny tremor. A worm wriggling under a pot. Surely he'll freeze, thought Grant. So he crept into motion and gently moved the pots closer to the shed where the soil stayed warmest. Then, just for fun, he nudged a few into funny shapes. A line, a tower, a circle. He couldn't wait to see Dad's face in the morning. The next day, when Dad went out to put the bins away, he stopped and frowned. "What's going on with my pots?" he said with his hands on his head. Shona looked out the window, guessed what had happened, and chuckled softly to herself. When the snow melted and the garden grew bright again, Dad said it was time to tidy up. "Come on, Shona," he called. Then he spotted Grant. "Look at that rock! Where did you come from?" "Dad, that's Grant," said Shona. "He's my stone." "Granite, aye," said Dad with a grin. "I'll put him out front." "No, Dad, he's Grant, not granite," said Shona. Dad shrugged and smiled. He bent down, huffing and puffing, while Grant dug his toes into the soil. Just a little. Then, with a quiet sigh, Grant let himself be lifted. "Good grief, he's heavy," said Dad, staggering away with his new garden ornament. Shona smiled, and Mum, who had heard the commotion, came out to see what was going on. She rested a hand on Shona's shoulder, watching Dad carry the stone. Dad placed Grant in the flower bed beneath Shona's window. Then he carried on with the jobs, planting bulbs, trimming plants, and tidying up. "I need to sort that gutter," he said. "You can play in your room if you like." Shona leant against the windowsill, watching. The ladder wobbled in the breeze, creaking like an old tree. "Careful, Dad," she called. Just as the ladder started to slip, Grant felt the tremor through the ground. He quickly uprooted himself, stepped forward, and with both hands steadied the ladder firm. "Phew," said Dad, climbing down. "Glad my balance is so good, or I'd have been on my bum." He hadn't noticed Grant at all. Shona covered her smile, and Grant quietly settled himself back into the soil, as if nothing at all had happened. Grant had settled into his bed, a flower bed, beneath Shona's window. It was the start of the school holidays, and Shona was full of plans and adventures. Each morning she would lift her blinds and see Grant below, warm and happy, a little smile on his face. Grant liked to stay under the window, knowing he was close to his friend. One sunny morning, Shona leant out and said, "Hello, Grant." He kept his smile and blinked his stony eyes to say hello back. At night, Grant listened to the laughter inside the house, feeling it hum through the ground. He stood in the moonlight, calm and still, keeping watch, and Shona slept sound. When the summer holidays ended, Shona put her red tartan uniform on again, ready for the new school year. Each morning she waved from the window before walking with Mum or Dad to catch the school bus. Grant stayed where he was, warm in the sunlight, the flowers growing around him like a soft green dressing gown. He didn't feel lonely. He liked the sound of the garden, the bees in the lavender, the ants and ladybirds at work, and the faint whisper of Shona's voice when she said bye each morning. One afternoon, a butterfly drifted down and rested on his head. Grant stayed perfectly still, and for a long, quiet moment, everything seemed at peace. Winter came again, and Grant stood steady after all the plants had gone. He wore a little hat of snow, and it made Shona giggle. Grant listened, feeling the giggle of his friend somewhere deep inside, a warmth that never left him. When he blinked, whole days would pass. His smile became part of the rock. One frosty morning, Shona wrapped a scarf around his neck. Grant could feel the fibres of wool soft against the cold stone. He blinked again, and the snow began to melt. Life went quietly by. Sometimes he felt a pat from Shona, a chuckle that gave him a flicker of warmth. He didn't move. He didn't need to. He was happy. Spring came again, as it always does. The air was soft, the light gentle, and the garden had grown full and green once more. Shona was taller now, her school bag slung across one shoulder. Each morning and evening she passed the window and always glanced towards the flower bed below. The old stone still sat there, half covered in moss, steady and quiet beneath the window. He looked as he always had, content, listening, part of the garden itself. Sometimes Shona paused before going inside, feeling a warmth she couldn't quite name. The house settled, the trees whispered, and the stone kept his watch. Epilogue: The Hill and the Gift. The days passed, the leaves turned and fell, and the river went on whispering beneath the bridge. But the stones, the old ones, remained steady as breath, steady as time. It was a bright afternoon, the kind that lingers before the year's turn. The sun drifted low, casting long shadows that stretched like the memory of summer. Shona, ready for another adventure, climbed the soft earthen steps, her shoes tapping a rhythm of their own. She climbed with the easy determination of a seasoned explorer, the breeze lifting her hair as she went. Her father followed, content with the world and all the quiet blessings it offered. As they reached the top, the hill opened before them. First, the ancient standing stones, then the old water tower, pale against the sky, and finally a bench, nestled beneath them in the sunlight. They swished aside the long grass and broom, following the faint path that climbed towards the Browland standing stones. At the crest, the circle lay broken, two still standing, one leaning, one half swallowed by turf. No crown now, but only the memory of something once whole, a story that earth still remembered. Lichen freckled their flanks. Light caught the pale grain of granite, stretching their shadows long. Shona pressed a palm to one, feeling its coolness. "Do you think gnomes still live under here?" "Maybe," said Dad. "Maybe they're just sleeping." "Like Grant?" "Aye," he smiled. "Maybe just like Grant." She looked up again. "They must be very old." "Older than castles," he said. "Maybe 3,000 years or more." They followed the path to the bench that waited at the foot of the old water tower. A cooler breeze reminded them that the seasons were never quite finished shifting. They rested side by side, looking out across the wide estuary, where the mouth of the River Spey flowed broad and calm as the water made its way to the sea, blue, silver, and still. He placed an arm around her shoulders to shield her from the wind as she curled in close, like a vole in its burrow. For a while the clouds played by, and the light moved gently across the fields below. Apart from the hush of the wind and the quiet beat of the water, the world seemed utterly at peace. For a while they said nothing, listening to the wind in the grass. Then Dad stirred, remembering he had something saved just for this moment. "Shona," he said softly, and when she looked up, he smiled. "I've got something for you." "A gift?" Her eyes lifted, bright with curiosity. He nodded and reached into his pocket, closing his fingers around something small and cool. He held it there for a moment, as if weighing its meaning, and then opened his hand. In his palm lay a smooth violet stone, faint white veins glimmering through it. "It's called an amethyst," he said. "Your birthstone. They say it helps make you feel calm, and it's very old, millions of years." Shona took it carefully, turning it in her palm until the sunlight caught its surface, rippling through the pale veins like water. She smiled and then closed her fingers around the stone and held it to her chest. The sea, the hills, even the wind seemed to pause. Then she glanced up again. "Dad?" "Mm-hmm." "Can I have my orange now?" He laughed again, the sound drifting out across the quiet air.